Sure. Some of you may remember me from 2010. I ran a close squeaker election against the current district attorney. So here I am back again. I am running for district attorney, and I'll tell you just a little bit about myself in case you haven't met me before. Would have liked to have been a Mainer, but unfortunately I was born in Massachusetts. My mother's from Massachusetts. My dad was from Worcester County, though, so I think that kind of equals out.
It does.
I get a little bit of a card for that. We moved here when I was about 5 years old, and I grew up here. I went to Ellsworth High School, and I attended the University of Maine at Orono, where I got a degree in psychology. I enlisted in the United States Army. I was a combat paramedic in the 82nd Airborne Division. Enlisted during Desert Storm. Didn't get a chance to go to Desert Storm to the Middle East, but that was the reason I signed up, was to go there. Unfortunately, by the time I get in, everybody was on their way back. When I got out of the Army, finished up my college degree, and then I decided I was going to go to law school and to graduate school. I went to Suffolk University in Boston, where my dad and my uncle both went to law school, and got an MBA with a concentration in finance from that school. And then at the law school, I got my Juris Doctor soon after that. I've been practicing here in Ellsworth for my entire career. I started out with my dad at his law practice with my uncle as well. My dad passed away in 2008, and at that time I went out on my own, started my own practice. I've been my entire career a criminal defense attorney, and that's a little bit of a different perspective than coming from the prosecutor's side. And people a lot of times ask me, well, why do you think you can do the job if you don't have any experience in that job? Well, as a lawyer, our job is to prepare both sides of any case. So in my job as a criminal defense attorney, I have to do the prosecutor's job too. Otherwise, I don't know what he's going to do. And so preparing the cases means preparing both sides of the cases. So I think in terms of experience doing the job, I really don't see that as a big issue. One of the things that I was thinking about earlier today was what is a really big issue? Why am I running for district attorney? And I think it boils down to perspective. This morning I was out plowing my yard, and I have this little button on my truck that the mirrors kind of flop in, and I pressed them in because I was getting up close to a tree. And as I was backing up again, I sped up to back up, and I pressed the button. And then I went to look, and what I saw in the mirror was the side of my house. And I slammed on the brakes, and I had this moment of, oh my gosh. And then I realized that the mirror was reflecting off my window, and it wasn't really what I was looking at behind me. There was nothing behind me. And I thought to myself, I wish the district attorney's office would have that moment of, oh, we need new perspective. Because, and I'll tell you a couple short stories about why it's really hard to put into words what all is wrong with the office. But I can tell you a couple of quick stories as to a couple of things that I think are wrong with the office. I have a client who is charged with operating after suspension. A fairly small charge. It's a misdemeanor. He is, if the facts are true, accused of driving about 150 feet down the side of the road to a farm stand to deliver his produce to his farm stand. If the allegations are true, he didn't have a license. It's a definite violation of the law. And there's a mandatory minimum sentence on it of a fine. Now, it seems pretty simple until you look at who the complaining witness is. The complaining witness is the secretary at the district attorney's office. And the reason that she complained about this gentleman was because they're having a boundary line dispute between their properties. And the district attorney's office has sent me an offer on that case to put this gentleman in jail for 2 days for this conduct that requires a fine. Now, that secretary used state resources to research this guy's driver's license. She brought that, she went and supposedly went and observed him driving, and then brought that information to the district attorney. The district attorney has agreed to prosecute that case based on her say-so, knowing that there is a a significant boundary line dispute and other disputes between the parties who are actually related. So that's, when I say perspective, that's the kind of thing that just cannot go on in a public office like the district attorney's office. And it makes me so upset to see that type of thing going on, that I just really believe that there needs to be some new perspective, new people in there. Am I saying that I'm going to run in there and fire everybody? No, that's not what I'm saying. But there needs to be somebody there to put a rein in on things that are going on. A couple of the other issues, I had some DHS caseworkers approached me recently and asked me about prosecutions for shaken baby syndrome. They indicated to me that the DA's office doesn't prosecute those. I haven't done any independent research on that, but it seems to me that that needs to be addressed, that needs to be prosecuted. I know it's difficult because a baby can't be a witness and testify against somebody that shook them, but, and my gosh, it may be almost impossible to prove the case, but that's something that needs to be looked into and taken care of. I was, and last one, I'll let everybody finish up. I was in 2013 appointed by one of the local judges as a special prosecutor. And there's my experience. I have prosecuted a case. And it was a case of a man who hadn't paid his child support to the tune of over $50,000. The reason I was appointed to prosecute this case is because the district attorney's office refused to do it. And the court had no other option but to ask, well, they could have asked the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office refused also to do it. And then I was appointed to do it. I got a conviction on the gentleman. He still hasn't paid all of his child support, but he's back making payments now. And those are the type of things, it seems like a small thing, but there's a crime in our statutes of non-supported dependents. Never gets prosecuted. The Attorney General's office apparently recently has decided that they're going to start prosecuting that, but there's nothing to prevent the district attorney's office from prosecuting those crimes as well. And I just think that there's a lot of things that aren't being done that need to be done, and I think that the perspective of the people who have been there for a long time is kind of focused on what we've done. And don't get me wrong, a lot of things have been done that are good, but there's kind of blinders on from people who have been there for 20 years. No offense.
Except in Washington County.
Except in Washington County. So that's why I'm running. I think that I could do a really good job. I have the financial background. I was the payroll supervisor and tax collector for the town of Bar Harbor for about a year when I first moved back up here before I started my law practice. So I have supervisory experience. I have financial education to deal with budgeting that goes along with the office. And I have the courtroom experience. I've done numerous trials in front of juries, in front of judges, and I think I'm a pretty good lawyer, and I think I do a really good job for the people of Hancock and Washington County. So I appreciate your support, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Yes?
Same question, Second Amendment?
I'm a member of the NRA.
Okay.
Yes?
I have a question, but I want to direct it to both you and Paul. A year ago, there was an unfortunate situation in the DA's office with Mary Kellett. It made the newspapers. How would you have handled that as DA?
We need a little background. Just what was it about?
Well, there was information withheld that a man did time.
Did everybody catch that? There was. Say it again, Janice.
There was information withheld from the courts, and a man did some time for it.
Mary Kellett was an assistant district attorney.
So I just want to know, as DA, how would, what would you have done? How would you handle?
You're standing, you first.
Okay. The only thing that I know about the situation is what I've seen in the papers and what I've heard, through the bar, and there was a bar complaint filed, and she was sanctioned in some way from the Board of Bar Overseers. Knowing that information, if I had been the district attorney at the time, she probably would not be working there anymore. However, I only have that part of the information. So, am I saying that if I get elected, I'm going to go firing people? No, I'm not saying that. I think that any type of personnel issue or professional issue like that needs to be looked at from the perspective of being in charge of that person, talking to the person, and trying to work it out and do what is right for people who voted the district attorney into office and the community and justice, for one thing. I just, it's such a black mark on the justice system to have anybody in the office of the district attorney, or private practice attorney for that matter, who puts the justice system in jeopardy in any way. And withholding evidence or saying things to a jury that are improper, just it doesn't make sense in terms of what we're here to do. And so, to answer the question, if I had been there at the time, knowing what I know now, she probably would have never. But that would be a decision that would need to be made once an election.
Paul?
I want to ask Paul the same.
Thank you. A couple of teaching moments, I call it, with my kids to make sure. The district attorney's office does not get cases from the public. We get them only from law enforcement. You can't call and say, here's a report, I want somebody prosecuted. We would refer you to law enforcement in whatever jurisdiction. What happened in this case, and if you, it is in the paper, you can find it in the Bangor Daily News, click down, the gentleman's name is Vladek Filler. He is associated with a number of groups that think men have been mistreated over history, that the women have masterminded the criminal justice system and the divorce system, and Mary Kellett is just another one of those women that has taken away all the rights of poor men. So look at the source of his complaint. I prosecuted the case the second time around. Ms. Kellett prosecuted him. There were two pieces of evidence that were at issue. The first was some written statements in an unrelated case to the Ellsworth PD, and the second item was a recording from a Washington County deputy. I don't remember whether it was a 911 or from the cruiser, but there was a recording made in the normal course of law enforcement. And Ms. Kellett had asked those two agencies for that material. The court had ordered her to provide it to the defendant. She requested it from those two agencies. The agencies did not provide it to our office, so we did not give it to him because we never had it. After his first trial, he got his hands on that stuff. It did exist, and he went to the court and said, wait a minute, I didn't have this. And the court said, Ms. Kellett, you should have given it to him. And she said, I didn't have it. I asked for it, and they didn't give it to me. How can I give what I don't have? And he filed a bar complaint and went through, and the court found out that the Board of Bar Overseers determined that she did not do enough due diligence in trying to get that it wasn't enough to say, hey Scott, you got anything? No, okay, thanks. There had to be a more formal process, and she failed to follow it, and she was held responsible for that. It didn't stop him. It didn't mean that he got away with abusing his wife because there was a mistake in the evidence. He got a second trial where he was convicted again of assaulting his wife and sentenced to 20 days in jail. Those two pieces of evidence that were so important to deny him his fundamental trial the first time were never used in the second trial. They didn't have anything to do with the second trial. Mr. Filler has now filed what we call a post-conviction review, a PCR, where he's saying even that conviction should now be thrown out because his defense attorneys weren't competent. So one thing we can be clear of is that it wasn't Mr. Filler's fault. It was his wife's fault, and then it was the prosecution's fault, and now it is the defense attorney's fault that he had to do time for assaulting his wife. So what would I do? What will happen? I've been on the Board of Overseers for 8 years. I've sat on those committees. I've done those decisions. We are in the process of a fundamental sea change of how that discovery material is handled. If you pick up the paper, you can see countrywide this is an issue and a problem. They just sent a judge in Texas to jail because when he was a prosecutor, he had stuff in his file that he didn't give, that he didn't think he needed to. Now, 25 years later, they're saying he had to, and he's been convicted of that and sent to jail as a judge when he was a prosecutor. Doesn't take too long ago, 6, 7 years ago, Duke LaCrosse, that case down in North Carolina, with a prosecutor running for office, fabricated something to try to get culture of the race vote, and he was disbarred and prosecuted himself. Okay, so it is a sea change in the way that is happening. All across the country, we were changing those policies. Law enforcement isn't real happy with this because instead of a phone call to Scott saying, hey, do you have that video, do you have that report, we're now demanding everything be in writing, we're demanding everything be so that we can tell the defense attorneys, yes, this exists, no, this doesn't exist. It is one of those moments when the world is changing. The bar has addressed Ms. Kellett's behavior and has imposed sanctions and imposed consequences on her for that behavior. I don't know that that was the only possible outcome in the understanding of the way it happened, but that's the way it happened, and she's been held accountable for that. I prosecuted the case when she was removed, and everything went fine, and as far as I know, he hasn't complained about me yet. So that's how I would handle it. You fix your mistakes. We're human, we make them. You move forward and try to put systems in place to avoid it.
But she admitted her mistakes.
She did, yes.
Yes.
Can I just clarify a couple of things there? Ms. Kellett's, the failure to turn over the information wasn't the only issue. Ms. Kellett, in her closing argument, commented on the fact that the defense didn't present any of the evidence that she never gave them, which is one of the issues. She said, where's the evidence to the jury in this case? And it was the evidence that she never gave them. So that was what the Board of Bar Overseers had a problem with. Mr. Filler was also charged with gross sexual assault in that case, which he was not convicted of. So to say that he was convicted of assault, yes, he was convicted of misdemeanor assault in certain 20 days, but in the meantime, he had been charged with gross sexual assault and served quite a bit of time in the county jail waiting for his court date to come. Those charges were not. He was found not guilty of those charges. So to say that Ms. Kellett's conduct didn't have any effect on the case is, I think, even if it didn't have an effect on the case, it had an effect on the justice system and the way the public perceives the justice system and the way the public perceives the district attorney's office. It just shouldn't have happened.
Okay, well, that was a good little thing. And you know, I think from the different perspective, defense and prosecuting, that's probably where the different issues are coming from on here as to what each one of these guys would do, or how they would have handled it, how they perceived it, how they saw it and everything. So we're not going to get into the merits of either one of the discussions, but it was a good discussion. And I appreciate all three of you guys being here today. We wish you luck. Could someone tell me the primary is June 10? June 10. Do not forget, guys. June 10 is the primary, and it's important. We sometimes forget about the primary, just looking towards November. But do remember that that is going to be an important, important elections. As I said, right now Scott doesn't have a Democrat. I don't know. Do they traditionally have put someone up, even if it's just a token, Janice or Scott?
Somebody can hold the seat, but